Hello, I'm Sinta Ebersohn. I'm the founder of Get Up and Grow. As you can see, I'm wearing my t-shirt. And today with me here is Melissa van Hal. She's a specialist wellness counselor. She's also a support learning specialist, an integrated learning and wellness strategist. And she's registered with both the ASCHP and SACE. Melissa, welcome and thank you for being here.
Sinta, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, well, let's just jump right in. You want to talk to us about resilient parenting, and your specific topic is about harmony in health, learning, wellness, relationships. It sounds like a well-rounded, resilient parenting topic that you're going to teach us a lot about. So please tell us more.
I think the important thing to remember when you're parenting is that you're working with yourself, who's a whole person, who has to look at yourself as a whole, and you're working with your child and your spouse. And each individual in that network, and if you've got more than one child and you've got quite a few children, so you've got the sibling networks as well, each of those individuals have their own whole person as well. And I think very often we tend to hone in on one area. And the difficulty with this is, for example, if I'm trying really hard to help my child succeed academically, but I'm not looking at their nutrition and their sleeping habits, they might be tired, they might not be getting the right nutrition for their body. They're not going to perform academically because they're lacking in the nutrients and the sleep that they actually need to succeed. Or maybe they're not getting enough exercise to boost their dopamine and increase their serotonin levels, which are really, really important. So when I look at parenting, and especially being a resilient parent, a parent that's willing to go through all the challenges and the ups and the downs and the excitement and the anxiety and the whole path that comes with being a parent, it's so important for me that we actually look at all aspects of the whole person in the network of all the different relationship dynamics. And that for me is why I say harmony and health. Wellness, learning, and relationships, because it's not just about having balance. A lot of people use the word balance. Mm-hmm. And for me, you can't have 25, 25, 25 or balance it out perfectly. Sometimes some areas need a little bit more dedication than others. And at other times, some areas need a little less. So you've got to have the harmony in the whole person, in the whole network. Mm. And that is why I am choosing to present this topic.
I love that you use the word harmony, because balance is challenging and actually not really doable or achievable most of the time. Like you said, you can't really, it's not cut and dry. So I love that you use the word harmony, and it ties in so beautifully with wellness, or the holistic approach that we can have around overall wellness for the family as a whole.
Yes, no, I actually really love the word harmony. I've been using it for a very long time in my sessions. And I notice now a lot more professionals are also referring to harmony as well. And I think, as you've just said, balance sounds, it's quite tricky to actually get everything in perfect equilibrium. It's a lot easier to understand that my life needs to be in harmony versus in balance.
So how do we do that? I'm a parent and I have children, and life has its ups and downs and challenges and adversities and really traumatic experiences also. How do I incorporate that? How do I achieve the harmony when things are going well and when things are going really tough?
I think the first thing for a parent to actually do in terms of trying to find harmony in the entire situation is to look at each individual first and look at all different aspects of each individual and make a note of where they seem to be performing really well, where there tends to be a bit of challenges, and to then look at each child as a whole person, each parent as a whole person, starting with the individuals first. And an important thing to remember here is that parents often jump to the challenges. So if I notice my child is struggling with their learning, we tend to suddenly go, okay, you're going to come home from school, you're going to do 2 hours of study, and then you're going to do another 3 hours of revision, and this poor child's already overwhelmed from coming home from school. Instead of actually going, well, how do I create harmony in my child's life? They're quite stressed from school. Learning is already a challenge. We actually need to be looking at other areas. Are they coming home and having decompression time, a time to just switch off and process the day? Are they coming home and having a nutritious meal? children who really struggle with learning actually need a lot more nutrition because their brain needs more, literally. So you need to look at that as your harmony. Harmony is about looking at each whole aspect and then building it from there, and being aware that because something's a challenge, we tend to dedicate a lot more time to the challenge instead of actually benefiting by actually using some of the strengths to help that challenge. A child that feels that they are alert, that they're not hungry, that they're willing to take on studies again, is going to be far more willing to do the extra work required than a child that's come home from school, is tired, is hungry, is still trying to process the day. And now you're saying, well, you know, we're really struggling with the studies, so let's just do some more right now. And I think that's a first step. So for yourself as a parent to take a step back and go, okay, where are my challenges? Where are my strengths? Okay, I notice I'm really good at communicating with my kids in the car. So you know what? On the way home, you've had quite a hectic day. Let's stop off and pick up some smoothies and let's go for an extra journey before we come home. That's about finding the harmony, not the fact that, okay, I'm really stressed about work and I've got this and I've got that, so I need to do all of these things. It's about finding where the strengths are and bringing those in to help you address the other areas.
As I was listening to you, I was thinking about a very general problem of children struggling with maths, for example. And parents' almost default reaction is to sign them up for extra maths classes. Now, even though there would be a place and a time for that, I often say, let's look at the things that you've just mentioned and see how we can bring more harmony for the child in at the child's life. Look at the nutrition and the sleep. Is the child getting enough rest, the decompression and the stress, instead of just running straight from school into an extra maths lesson and putting on the pressure, and like you said, actually focusing on the challenge and maybe making that worse instead of making it better.
Yes, I think the idea to which you've picked up very nicely there is that when we see the challenges, we over dedicate to them. So in my support learning field, and yes, maths is generally one of the bigger concerns that come through my door. And instead of saying, okay, we're going to come in and we're going to do addition and we're going to do subtraction and we're going to focus on the maths, I actually incorporate activities that build on skills that the children don't even realize are maths based. For example, puzzles. And when we're packing the puzzle away, I'll get them to put it in groups of 3, or I'll get them to look at the puzzle and we'll talk about the outside of the puzzle, which then I'll say, oh yeah, that's the perimeter. And then we look at the inside of the puzzle and we talk about that's the area. But again, if I have a child walk through my door and I can see they're tired and they're exhausted or they're dehydrated, my initial response is not, okay, let's whip out a maths book. My initial response is, okay, let's sit down. Let's breathe. Maybe let's play with some dough, or let's talk about your day. And we actually take that step back, a complete step back, so that we give them the space to regulate themselves, to find themselves, to process what they're in. So that's just an example in a lesson. And then I find afterwards I can do the maths, but the child is willing because they're in this space. Whereas if they walk in and I notice they're not, and I suddenly go like, no, we've got to really do this math now because, you know, you're coming for 30 minutes and we have to do 30 minutes of math. I spend 30 minutes and I gain nothing. Whereas I can spend 10 minutes regulating, making sure the child maybe has some water to drink. If they've got a snack, have a little bit to nibble on, play with some dough, build a puzzle, talk about the day. And then we do 20 minutes and it's really beneficial. The child is involved. They're back in the game, as it were. They want to be there. And it's the same in parenting. When you see that your child is struggling, if you over dedicate the time, what actually happens is that time becomes null and void because the child isn't truly present. So you are now running off and doing 5 hours of maths, and you're lucky if you're getting maybe 15 minutes out of the 5 hours. And I think if people change that view, if they start realizing it's about the harmony in it, and they start realizing that if my child's got enough sleep, you know, keeping them up to 12 at night to finish maths homework is not going to help them overcome the maths challenge. In fact, they're going to be tired the next day, and the new lesson in class is going to be lost. So it's really important to realize that sometimes it's quality over quantity. And that's a lot of what harmony is about. It's about finding the quality. It's better to study 10 minutes and really focus in those 10 minutes than study 3 hours and gain nothing. And I think if parents took that approach in their parenting, if they looked at where their child was and realized, hang on a minute, my child is tired. They've been playing hockey all afternoon. They've been at school till 3. To actually go, let's have a shower. Let's have some dinner as a family. Let's just completely take things down a step. And then your child maybe studies for an hour afterwards. You're going to find, even an hour is a bit much sometimes, even just 30 minutes, you are going to get quality study time, quality progress. Whereas your poor child coming home, sitting down for 3 hours and not having any regulation, any decompression, any harmony, those 3 hours actually are detrimental versus beneficial.
Yeah. And also, even if it's less, but it's more focused and it's done in harmony, it leaves a child with a sense of achievement, that which I know as a resilience practitioner is so, so important to cultivate the resilience consciously in all areas of our lives. It's so important to feel that they've achieved something, that you've done something right, that you've taken a step forward, instead of this constant sense of being challenged or overwhelmed or failing at what it is that they need to do. Hey.
Yes, no, I completely agree. And that's also why this focus on a quality, small time period creates that sense of achievement. It's a lot easier for a child to come home and go, I'm going to do 10 minutes, than to come home and go, I'm going to do 3 hours.
Yes.
I mean, even I say 3 hours and my heart starts jumping here. But the reality is a lot of the kids who walk through my doors, this is the current expectation. It's that you must study 3 hours solidly a day. And there's no explanation on how to do it, no explanation that you need to actually feel hydrated, that you need to feel nourished, that a little bit of exercise gets your brain going. No, there's just this expectation of 3 hours. So there's no harmony in that expectation. There's no looking at the child as a whole. And what actually then happens is it causes a lot of friction between the parent-child relationship. And then we find that the children rebel more. They don't want to be involved in the tasks. They tend to pull themselves out, and parents find themselves, for lack of a better word, shouting more. Why haven't you done this? Why isn't your homework done? Because what's actually happening is your child's life isn't in harmony and they are depleted. So they're not rebelling because they don't want to. They're rebelling because they literally can't. The capacity to do what you're expecting is not there.
And in worst case scenarios, children also end up lying about having done the work, or they lock themselves in their rooms and they pretend to be studying while there's actually nothing productive happening in there. So it leads to a lot of other challenges in the parent-child relationships and conflict often, which I think is something we're also going to talk about a little bit later. Hey.
Yes, no, definitely.
Yeah. So how I want to just take a moment and think about this expectation that we have, especially the academic expectation. Where is this coming from? Why are we living those kind of lives? Why are our societies operating this way with this huge expectation on everybody to perform? There's pressure, and there's very little mind given to creating the harmony as you're explaining it.
I think, Sinta, there is a lot that needs to change in terms of how we perceive a healthy life. We're still very stuck in this idea that all jobs need to be 9 to 5. And while that may work very well for some people, it doesn't work well for every type of person. I'm not a huge fan of the word neurodivergent, but it is used to describe people that are not neurotypical. And a lot of those people actually benefit from flexible hours because they work with their creativity, not a timeline. It's also the expectation, unfortunately, in South Africa, our school system is very heavy content-based, not concept-based, which means that there's a lot more work that needs to be covered rather than looking at problem solving, critical thinking, and developing conceptual knowledge, which then the children can actually take and apply to content that they are interested in or would like to learn more about. So there are a lot of things in our actual lifestyle, our system, our job lives, our work, our passions even, we look at things and people seem to think I can only do my hobbies in the evenings and I can only do my hobbies over the weekends. Instead of trying to look at it, well, if I'm tired and frustrated at work, maybe taking an hour off to go to the gym is actually better because I'll come back and I will be refreshed. My brain will be recharged. And I think for me, that this is a huge societal issue that needs to be looked at. It needs to be reconsidered. My great concern, though, especially when it comes to children, and I think a lot of parents miss this, is that your workday is usually Monday to Friday, or even maybe Monday to Saturday. The expectation that children are required to work Monday to Sunday, because you're asking them to study over the weekends, you're asking them to do homework over the weekends, you're asking them to do it 7 days a week, you're asking them to attend school for 8 hours roughly, then come home and still do homework. Your work day does not entail that. So the
Yeah.
expectation that we are putting on children, I think, is very unrealistic.
Mm.
In my process, when I work with the learners that come to me, and we do a lot of educational wellness, and I explain to parents, is that it's about the quality, and your child needs a day off just as much as you do.
Yes.
They really, really do. And I always say to the kids, you need to pick one day, either Saturday or Sunday, and that's your day off. Go do your hobbies, go be with your friends, chill at home, spend time with the family, but don't look at work. Don't be involved with work. You need your time. And I feel that this is a message that most parents really need to hear and understand. You don't work 7 days a week. Even if you work for yourself, we will say to ourselves, you know what, I'm taking this morning off.
Mm.
I'm taking a breather. The expectation that your child must go to school 5 days a week, be at school for 6 to 8 hours, come home, do homework, and study. You're asking them to dedicate 10 to 12 hours of their day to school. And then you're asking them over the weekend to dedicate another further 4 to 8 hours for both days. This is a very unrealistic expectation. And to realize that for parents, I think, is quite hard, because we see it as, well, if they don't do it, they're not going to perform academically.
Yes.
And the reality is, and I'm seeing it more and more, is the children who actually have their day off, who have proper structure in their studies and are really having harmony in their life, they're performing better. I actually have a learner at the moment who has started becoming quite more methodical with their studies, and they're putting in half an hour every day, and their marks are just continuously improving, just continuously all the time. Every time they walk through my door, they're like, oh, I've got new marks and look how great it is. And it's a consistent improvement. But the stress is no longer there because there's more harmony in their life. And I think parents need to actually take that step back. And I'm a parent, and I say this myself. There are times where I'm like, oh, my daughter really should be doing her homework. But I've actually realized, no, I need to step back, because maybe it's more important for her now to be doing her art, because maybe her brain needs to process whatever it is that she's just read.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm so glad you brought it up. The expectation that we have of children to work full hours and literally after hours. What we're actually teaching our children to do are things that we frown upon when adults do it. When an adult brings work home to do after hours, we frown upon it, and we lecture them, and we tell them, you need to take a break, you need to find the balance. And yet our children, if we look at their school as the jobs that they do, they have to bring work home every day and work every weekend, which is a very, very unhealthy. There's no harmony in that, eh?
No, very little harmony.
Yeah. So what can you tell us about habits, healthy habits? Can you give us some practical tips? Give parents some practical tips. We've talked about we need to see what our children need, and give them what they need to create that harmony. What kind of habits would be good ones, or tips can you offer?
I think for me, the most important habit that we have in my household, and I recommend it for all parents, is decompression time. I think if you notice yourself, your child, your spouse is feeling overwhelmed or has had a long day, you have to implement decompression time. In my household, we actually have decompression time every day, and everybody has decompression time. And it is by far the healthiest habit we have. If we are arguing and we notice that we're getting a bit intense, we all take a step back and we're like, hang on a minute, we all need to decompress. And then we re-engage in that argument later. But it becomes a discussion, not an argument, because we all have regulated, we've all decompressed, and we're in a better space. Other healthy habits are to ensure that you are drinking sufficient water every day. Water itself is a wonderful way if you're feeling dysregulated or overwhelmed to just sit down and take a few sips of water and focus on drinking the water. It's first of all hydrating you, but second of all, that conscious decision to just break and take 2 sips of water. I use it quite a lot in my sessions as well when I'm counseling and when I'm working with children. I'll say, let's just have a sip of water before we continue. And I often just pause and I just let it be quiet and I just let everybody enjoy the moment. But it's also really beneficial because I don't think enough people are hydrated. And if you're not hydrated, there are a lot of physical symptoms that come with that, especially headaches and that brain fog and that sort of dizziness, and your blood pressure tends to drop as well. Other healthy habits is having exercise in your daily life. A lot of people think that this now means I must rush off to gym and give an hour to the gym schedule. And unfortunately, that's not realistic for many, many people, especially moms. And now this is more for the moms on this side. But getting exercise into your life is really important. So when you're at the shops, take those stairs. Don't take the lift or the escalator. If you're feeling like you're getting a little bit frustrated, just go for a walk around the block. Getting that movement into your life is so positive, and it's such a good habit to formulate, to bring into your life. And especially for moms, because I think a lot of moms think that, everything else has to come first. But if you're not exercised and you're not giving yourself that little boost physically, you yourself become dysregulated, and that does transfer to your family. So I think having that, I like to call it movement in my day versus exercise in my day. And I think to be aware of the other 2 things that are good, healthy habits is your nutrition. I think it's really important to ensure that you are eating properly and that there is decent food in your daily schedule. And whether that's keeping some fruit on you when you feel a bit low with your blood sugar, whether it's making sure you have enough protein, very important habits to formulate. I know that often food is not included. I don't know many families that do family dinners anymore. And for me, family dinners are essential. It's a time to communicate, a time to bond. So that is a habit for me. It's a non-negotiable in this house. We have family dinner every night. Sometimes the time might change to accommodate everybody. And the last thing that for me is very, very important and that needs to be a healthy habit is to engage daily with your spouse, with your kids on how their day is going. And the how was your day is not the question to be asking. We tend to avoid that. I try look for different things. I'll be like, oh, what was your favorite activity today? What did you find most stressful today? Did any of your friends tell you something new or interesting? So the idea is to open up conversations. And I think as a parent, you want to open those doors with your children. And I think it's also important. A lot of parents don't share their daily struggles with their children. So children are not going to share theirs back with you because they look at you and they go, well, mom doesn't have these issues. Dad doesn't have these issues. So I probably shouldn't talk about mine. So it doesn't mean you reveal the entire situation, but you can say, oh, today I got a phone call and this person was just yelling at me and I felt so frustrated. And then, you'll notice your kid will come and you'll go, what happened at school today? So-and-so spoke to me like this and I felt really hurt. Yes, score, I'm getting information about the day. But that's because they will remember in the back of their minds the time that you said to them, oh, I got this phone call. So the habits for me that are important are not so much about specific habits, about changing behaviors, behavioral habits, drinking your water, opening up conversations, getting your daily movement in. Those are the habits that I think we need to include for ourselves and our children.
Mindfulness comes to mind as I'm thinking this. And as a person who absolutely loves rituals, I like to make some of these kind of everyday activities a ritual, like the family dinner, like sharing about our experiences of the day, or like I live close to the beach, and we would very often, whoever is around, just up and go to the beach and go and watch the sunset. Most days, if we can, it's 20 minutes to half an hour of our time. And it's a ritual, but it's a grounding exercise. And together with that, there's movement involved. It's a bonding experience. We have a bit of conversation. It's a regulating activity as well. It's so many things all in one. And that creates the harmony. And then we all get up from there and continue with the evening and do whatever still needs to be done. So yes, I like what you say. And I think there's so many ways that we can do this sort of thing to create the harmony, or to bring the harmony back when it's all out of whack, I almost want to say.
Yes, no, there are lots of little things. And I love your idea of the beach. I think it's amazing. But one of the things we do in our house, and because we're not as fortunate to be as close to the beach, but sometimes at night, if it's a really nice night, we'll go outside, we'll stand on the grass barefoot, and we actually look at the stars. And we just appreciate the different stars, and we discuss the moon and the stars. And it's that moment that you're just breaking away. And even if it's just 5 minutes to just go outside. And I think that's what people need to realize. That's what harmony really is about. It's not about pushing ourselves beyond what we are capable of. It's about including in our lives what we are capable of. And as you were saying, it's that mindfulness. I think so often we rush through our food. We don't actually enjoy our food anymore. It's like, I notice people come and they finish their meal in like 5 minutes, and I'm like, well, what did it taste like? What did you enjoy most? We're just rushing through everything. And I think people see mindfulness as this very difficult task to do. And it's not. It's really simple. It's literally like when you're drinking your water, is it warm? Is it cold? When you're eating your food, what is the texture like? Mindfulness for me is literally just bringing our senses back into our daily life and becoming aware of those. So I think that's the big thing. We tend to think, oh, how am I going to bring harmony into my life? I don't have time to do an hour's exercise, an hour self-care, and an hour of this. But like you said, with the beach, which is beautiful, that in itself, it's 20 minutes, but it's self-care. It's opening up communication. It's movement. It incorporates so many little things into one. So even if your moment of just breaking to form harmony is sitting down as a family and just talking for 5 minutes, it's such a lovely small little thing. And a lot of people feel we don't have time for it. But if you start doing it, you suddenly realize 5 minutes isn't actually that much to ask. And it changes everything.
Yeah. It isn't really, and I remember now, especially when my children were younger, I was guilty of it myself, of doing everything on the run and eating on the run, because you have to prepare different food for the smaller children and make sure that they are fed and well cared for. So you end up as a mother eating on the run or in the car while you're driving and that sort of stuff. I did it so many times because it was so rushed. And really to take 5 minutes to just sit down and have that cup of tea. And like you said, think about what it tastes like, what the temperature is, what the aroma is, and maybe just relax your body while you're doing it. Does you a world of good. And it's not going to disrupt your whole day. It's not a big chunk out of whatever it is that you're busy with or have to get to, what you're on your way to, it just slows down that rush a little bit. And that's healthy.
It's very healthy. It's like the pause that we all need. And I think we forget to push pause sometimes.
Yeah. And we, as parents, we become good at telling our children, take a breath. And we need to remind ourselves that we also need to do that, I think.
Yes, especially I think a lot of parents and moms in particular, they're taking a lot of the primary caregiver roles on. And we sort of sit in the car and we think, oh, I've got to rush here and we've got to rush there. And I often say to like some of the moms that I work with, I say, when you're in the car, just wind down your window, feel the air come in, just sit down. I mean, you've got your little flask there with your coffee. Instead of just glugging it, sit there while you're waiting for the kids to come out and just really enjoy the cup. Enjoy it. You might be in your car, but there's no reason for you to rush drink it while you're waiting. You're waiting any rates. Enjoy that moment.
Yeah. So, Melissa, thank you. It's wonderful advice and really practically applicable things that you're sharing with us. As always, I appreciate it. It's very valuable. Let's take a moment to take a step back to the language you mentioned earlier. We shouldn't ask our children, "How was your day?" And there are other ways to get the information out of them without them actually realizing it. I know that you have very, very interesting and creative ideas about how we're supposed to speak to our children. The proactive language that we use, the positive reinforcement. Please tell us more about that.
So I think one of the things for me is that when we tend to communicate, we tend to command rather than communicate. We don't offer questions that engage. We kind of offer very broad questions. And children, especially teenagers here, are reluctant to speak to parents. It's part of the phase. They're trying to become an adult themselves. They're trying to find themselves in their space. So one of the things that I'm a big believer in, as you know, is proactive language, which is basically the decision to talk to your child in a way that engages them to act on what you're talking about. So, for example, if I come in and I say, you need to study, first of all, it's a command. And as a teenager, the instinct is naturally to rebel because remember, they're trying to form their own self-identity. So by putting that demand on them and that command, you're now telling them you don't have an identity right now. You are subjected to what needs to be done. And that causes a lot of friction. They're going to rebel against that. Whereas if you come in and you say a proactive choice in what you're saying, so what you really want is you really would like them to study, to rather be more engaging and say, you know, oh, what was on your list to study today? You know, now you're not saying, have you studied? You're not telling them to study. Instead, you're actually saying to them, well, you had an idea of what you wanted to do. Do you want to tell me about your idea? And that's a totally different way. And of course, originally, they're still going to be quite reluctant because suddenly they're going to realize you're talking to them differently. Why is this change happening? But the more you offer those conversations, the more they're going to be willing to engage back. So they might say, oh, I was going to do history today, you know, and then you can go, oh, tell me about history. Now you're too broad again. So you go down, you go, oh, so what was the favorite part of what you learned today? Or what was the part that you found most challenging? Or do you think that there's anything you're going to need to ask your teacher about? You're now giving them something proactive, something specific that follows onto that conversation. So it takes a bit of practice. And I like to say to parents, when you want to be proactive, think about it. What is it that you want to achieve in this conversation? Because you obviously want to avoid friction and you don't want to put commands across, but we still need action to occur. For example, we may have a list that everybody needs to do that are specific things. So somebody might be responsible for washing the dishes. Somebody might be responsible for putting the clothes in the wash. So you still want your child or your teenager to be accountable and be responsible. But demanding or commanding then challenges that self-identity. So we need to think, okay, they have not done the dishes. I need them to do the dishes. But if I make a command, they're going to rebel. So a more appropriate response and more proactive response would be, you know, I notice that you haven't done the dishes yet. Is there a specific time you're going to do the dishes? Now they might go, oh, I don't know if I want to do the dishes, or they might turn around and go, well, I haven't done it yet. And that will be the normal response. Then you can then say, well, maybe could you tell me, are you going to do it 30 minutes from now, or are you going to do it an hour from now? Now you give them a choice. And the key there is it's a choice, but you're not taking away their ability to choose and you're limiting it. So you're still getting the task done, but within a parameter that they're working with their own self-identity. And to remind them about things like being accountable and being responsible. And if they turn around, oh, well, I don't want to wash the dishes, you know, it's not about, oh, well, why don't you want to wash the dishes? It's about, well, what's preventing you? You're part of this family. We all have specific roles to play. This is your role to play. And maybe that day they might have had enough with the day and they're feeling frustrated and they're feeling tired and they've had a terrible day at school. And if you actually find that out, you can offer solutions. You can say, well, I understand. I hear you've had a fight with your friend. It's been an exhausting day. So how about I'll do the dishes tonight, but tomorrow you will put the laundry in the wash. So you give them your chore. So you give them that swap, because remember, your teenagers are human.
Yeah.
They're like us as adults. We have days where things have happened to us, but we need to engage in those conversations. So instead of saying, oh, well, you know, you're in trouble because you don't want to do the dishes, my instinct is, well, why don't you want to do the dishes?
Mm.
What's actually causing that issue? And then you can also navigate really important conversations around accountability, around responsibility, about realizing my own capacity. Because teenagers, remember, they also have levels. They also have so much that they can do. And if you understand what's happening in their mind, and I think a lot of parents see their teenagers go into the room and they see them sit in their room. So they think, but you're not doing anything. But teenagers are experiencing hormones. They're experiencing processing. They're developing a lot of changes. And that emotionally itself is a lot of cognitive overload. So to you, it may look like they've been doing nothing, but meanwhile, in that bedroom, they've been thinking about social dynamics at school. They've been thinking about the fact that now they're attracted to someone and they're not really sure how they're going to deal with that. They're busy thinking about, well, who am I as a person and why am I feeling so upset today? That's exhausting in itself. So we have to take these step backs. But again, it's about being proactive, being effective in your parenting, and also teaching our own children about resilience. You can have a bad day. Doesn't mean that you get to abscond your responsibilities, but there are days where we have to go, well, maybe today was just a bit too much. So how do we work in that? How do we offer them solutions to show them how to deal with this as an adult? Because otherwise they're going to be having burnout. They're going to be having depression, anxiety, and we are seeing this on the rise pretty much every day consistently with our teenagers. So we need to teach them that resilience, but we also need to give them the space to learn it through proactive language and positive reinforcement, which is the other point you mentioned. We often turn to the critical. A parent's result is, what are you not doing that needs to be done? Instead of recognizing what they are doing. And we forget to mention that. Teenagers love compliments. Teenagers love being told what they're doing right. And we forget that. So when you see your kid is doing something that you really, really want, like you catch them studying, you need to catch that moment and go, you know what? I am so proud of you for studying right now. This is going to make such a difference in your learning. Oh my goodness, you know, I walked past tonight. I saw all the dishes done. My kitchen was sparkling. This is incredible. Thank you so much. Now they're suddenly realizing their role has value. Oh, I did the dishes. I helped my family. It's not just I did dishes. There's value to it. And we need to catch those moments, and we need to focus on catching those moments, not just the moments that we find negative or want to change.
Yeah, that makes sense. That the acknowledgement is so important, and that's something we all need, is to be acknowledged for our contribution in the family as well. Hey.
Yes, I think positive reinforcement goes for spouses as well. It's not just linked to children.
It's great for all relationships. But Melissa, how does this tie into boundaries? Boundaries is a word we hear so often. How does this tie in? How do I set my boundaries as a parent firmly and maintain them where I want them to be, but use the proactive language and not be too critical or not be aggressive about it?
So I think the first thing that when we look at boundaries, like, first of all, I don't really like the term of discipline or having punishment in a house. I find that is really quite an aggressive way of approaching things, because yes, there needs to be discipline, but I like to see it as rather a consequence or a result of behaviors. But before we can even begin there, we have to look at what boundaries are, and having boundaries in place. It is absolutely essential that your family, your spouse, your children, whoever is in your network at home, understands the boundaries. I think a lot of the time we don't verbalize our boundaries, and we get angry and we get upset, and the other person's sitting there going, I don't know what I've done. You're getting very angry at me and I don't know. So from the parent perspective, do your children and teenagers and spouse know what your boundaries are? Yeah. Do you have ways of communicating that allow them to know that. For example, if I've had a very long day at work and I know my patience is just not up to scratch, and I know my communication is just not up to scratch, the first thing I tell all of my family members is I need decompression time before I can communicate. And they all know. They all automatically, they go. They just disappear because they know I need that time to work with what I need. Another thing is what are my boundaries? So I don't have sets of rules, which I think are quite difficult for everybody to remember all the time. I'm not allowed to do this. I'm not allowed to do this. I have to do this. I'm not allowed to do that. For me, my boundary is it respectful?
Mm-hmm.
If it is not respectful, the immediate thing that you can do as a parent is say to your child, was that a respectful behavior?
Mm.
You are immediately now reinforcing your boundary, but you're actually also getting them to think. You're getting them to problem solve. You're getting them to critically think about that specific behavior. And the thing about boundaries as well is you need to make it about behaviors and actions versus about the person, because then we resort to things like saying to our child, oh, you're just lazy.
Yes.
Which is name calling.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't help you then reinforce your boundary, because I can guarantee you right now your child is going to do one of two things. They're either going to go, oh, well, if you think I'm lazy, I'm just going to continue being lazy, or they are going to resist you like you cannot believe, and you're going to have arguments. And they're going to become what you would say, oh, rebellious and difficult and challenging, but you've just labeled them something. So as a parent, you don't realize what you've done, but you've put a label on your child. Oh, you're useless. Can't clean your room. You're just useless. You've just thrown out a label. So again, you're breaking your own boundaries and you're breaking their boundaries because you've name called them. So that whole idea of respect. So as a parent, I think what we need to do is know what our boundaries are. Like my boundary is very clearly respect. So if you're making a mess in my house, you're not really being respectful towards me because it's my house. If you talk to me in a certain manner, you're not being respectful towards me. So it's very easy for me. I have one very simple boundary, and it's literally like, is this respectful? And it's so easy because my daughter knows, because I can turn around immediately. The other day, she had a huge project she needed done, and I'm going to use a personal experience here. And she hadn't done it on time, and she was falling more and more behind. And I tried very gently throughout, and I'm a big believer in life lessons, by the way. So she ended up getting the project done. It wasn't up to scratch, but I said to her, but now you understand. But in this moment, she was really not using the nicest tone with me. And she was being very rude and disrespectful and all of those kind of things. Now, usually I'd be like, don't talk to me like that. Don't do this. Don't, like, this is the normal go-to for parents. And your child rebels more. My instantaneous response was, is this respectful? And she had to stop. She couldn't continue arguing anymore. She actually had to, whoa, what are you? And then she realized, I shouldn't be talking like this. Like, yes.
Love that. I think that will work like a charm.
It does. It takes them to get a step back. But then the important thing to remember is that you've got to be respectful to your child as well.
As well, yes.
So,
I can see how that moment, asking that question, or also in the heat of the moment, can, water it down or give everybody an opportunity to just take a moment and regulate themselves. Oh my goodness, I'm not being respectful right now. It's quite something to realize, but there's a very subtle difference in being asked, is that respectful, than being told you are being disrespectful.
Exactly. And that's the proactive language again, because it's reinforcing a question that gets them to think about it. And the great thing about in that moment is she just calmed down immediately. And she was like, well, actually, no, this is not how I want to be talking. And the conversation changed. And then we actually managed to work through the project, and the whole dynamic changed. And I think that's where parents need to just for a moment think about, what is the response if your child's yelling at you? And oh my gosh, there are days, believe me, I'm not perfect myself. I want to yell back. I feel them pushing all my little triggers and all my little buttons, and I feel it. And there are days where I have to catch myself. And I think that's important to remember as a parent. We don't get this right all the time. We really, really don't. And one of the things is actually taking ownership of that as well. to go back to your child and say, listen, me shouting back at you wasn't ideal. I should rather have done this, because now what you're actually doing is modeling the correct behavior as well. You're actually saying to them, in that moment, the behavior that I reflected wasn't great. Now, there's a key thing there. I'm talking about my behavior in that moment. I'm not saying I'm a bad parent. I'm not saying that I'm completely wrong and that, my child has control over me, which I think a lot of parents think when you do this. This is not about this. This is about taking accountability for my behavior, which you want your child to do as well. And if they realize that, then they're going to start doing it themselves. My daughter now does it. She will literally come to me and she'll go, I really shouldn't have done that. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just so angry in that moment. Next time I'm going to try breathe when I'm angry. And it's because I've done that. I've gone to him and said, I had a hectic day and I was just exhausted and I really raised my voice when I shouldn't have. Next time, I'm rather going to take a little bit longer when I'm decompressing. And the importance that, again, is that proactive, I'm actually providing solutions. I don't go, oh yeah, I was wrong and there's no, that doesn't help anybody. You need to identify the behavior and then you need to provide solutions so that your child then is able to do that too.
And it's so valuable, and it's actually so simple. We need to just model that behavior to our children, and that's how they learn. They what's that saying that always says our children do what they see us do, not what we tell them to do. Hey, I
Yes.
want to share a very cute story, a personal story of my son, my firstborn son, when he was quite small. I think he was about 4 years old, and I lost it one day and I yelled at him, and I very nicely went and apologized to him and explained to him that what I did was not right and that I'm sorry for having yelled at him and that I shouldn't do it. And a few hours later, when his father walked into the door, he ran to his father and said, Mommy yelled at me and she said she was sorry. And it was like, for a couple of days after that, it was his favorite story to tell everybody, much to my embarrassment. And I was eventually feeling like, oh, I'm never going to apologize or admit doing anything wrong ever again. But he picked up on that so well, actually. And he learned that lesson at that young age because the way I modeled it. And even though it turned out to be quite funny and even embarrassing to me in some instances, it was a lesson well learned for him.
And I think it's very important that the whole idea is that your children really do model you. And I think that for me, one of the big key things of being a parent is actually being transparent with your child and having these conversations. The other thing that we often talk about in our household is we don't complain, we find solutions. I'm, again, similar to you, big critical thinker, problem solver person. And I always say to my daughter, we can complain about stuff, but if you're not trying to find solutions, you're going to remain in that same space, which brings us back to the whole thing that parents need to see when they're actually saying, oh, I made this behavior, which wasn't great, but then offering the correct option or the correct solution is a wonderful way to also help your child learn. For example, if your child is doing something that really is breaking a boundary, so for example, let's say they're swearing at you, to say to them, do you think this is respectful language? And then they'll go, probably not, and be, that little scam teenager that comes out, that shy, like feels awkward. To then say to them, what would you like to say instead? What are other options? So now you're actually getting them to think about their behaviors rather, again, than always telling our children. We have a great tendency to want to tell them what to do. Don't swear at me, talk to me like this. And I don't know about you as an adult, but if somebody comes to me and says, I need to do something in a very specific way, my response is to rather be like, my back is up, and now I'm like, why must I do it that way? And if you've got a strong-willed child, that is literally the response you're going to get. So our children who do have that sort of oppositional defiant behaviors, if you tell them what to do, they will react negatively. It's more important to get them to think about what they're doing, think about how they're behaving, and get them to find solutions versus actually telling them and opening up those discussions. Children also on the spectrum tend to find discussions with options a lot more beneficial than just being told this is how it is.
And I
So
think as we are getting them to think about it, we're also teaching them a very important life skill. Whenever they are reacting, and something we all need to learn to do, is whenever we are activated or triggered, as some say, and we are lashing out or behaving in a disrespectful manner, the ability to stop and think about our own behavior or think about our own actions is a life skill that everybody needs to learn. It's actually a resilience skill that we all need to learn, because that helps us to work through that situation, overcome it, and move forward. Whereas if we're not able to do that, we're getting stuck in that situation. It might cause conflict, and it's something we can't resolve.
Yes, no, definitely. And I also think it's important, especially when you're talking about like the resilience aspect of things, is that it's important for children to realize that they can experience anger. Anger itself is not a bad emotion. Usually
Yes.
it's a warning sign. Usually if you're feeling angry about something, something has happened to you that you are uncomfortable with. So, for example, I'm going to use again with my own daughter. I took her iPad away the other day because she was focused so much on it. And I said, we need a break. We need to actually take a break from it. And she was very angry. And she said to me, I'm really angry right now. And I said to her, but why are you angry? Let's identify what's triggering that anger. And she said, well, because I feel like you are taking something away from me, but at the same time, I understand why, but I'm still angry. And it was that realization in herself. And she immediately calmed down. She was like, yeah, actually, I'm angry because I feel threatened that something's being taken away from me. But when I actually look at it from a logical perspective, it's so that I can decompress. It's so that I can have a break from technology. And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. So why are you feeling angry? Maybe you're feeling angry because somebody is stepping on your personal boundaries. When your teen is lashing out, or you are perhaps getting angry back, it's not about not feeling the anger. It's about recognizing where that anger comes from. And it's really important. I often say to the learners that come here and the parents that come here and my clients that come here, look at where that emotion is coming from. Because most emotions are trying to tell you something. If you are fearful of something, there's a reason you're feeling fearful. You know, like often when we do new adventures or you go down zip lines and things, to get that fear. And you need to realize, okay, it's just warning me that this is something new. This is something different. So I need to do it more cautiously. I'm going to listen to what the instructor's telling me. I'm going to think about what I'm doing. And I think if we teach our children and ourselves, because I think a lot of adults need to hear this too, your emotions are just telling you something. They're just warning you. When you feel sad, you're feeling sad because something has happened to you that is making you feel that sadness. You know, grief and loss is a huge sadness that we feel. And I think we underestimate these feelings in our teenagers. You know, for them, when they get kicked out of a group of friends, for example, that is life altering. They're going to experience several emotions, and to help them understand why they're feeling them, because that is key. And I think to realize that as well is a huge part of parenting. We seem to think that our poor teens have got it all set up and they know exactly what all these different emotions mean and why they're experiencing. And now you're busy throwing hormones into the mix. We as parents actually need to guide them through that, you know, to take that moment back and say, wow, I feel like you're quite angry right now. Do you know why you're feeling angry? It breaks the conversation. And notice how I say, I notice that you're feeling quite angry. I'm not telling them they're angry at me. I'm not saying why they're angry. I'm just picking up on the emotion. And then I'm giving them the reason to explain. Because sometimes they're angry and it's got nothing to do with you as the parent. It's something else that's happened and they just need to release the anger.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. The more I listen to you, the more I realize that it's just so important as parents that we need to really see our children, observe them carefully, and be alert to whatever is their bodies and their facial expressions and their postures and things are actually showing us and telling us so much about them. And it's important for us to have that awareness, but to acknowledge it and to communicate back to our children that I see you. Like you said, I notice that you're frustrated. I notice your anger. That in itself, I think, is a very important part of resilient parenting, is teaching our children that we are aware of each other in the family. We take care, we make an effort to notice what's going on with each other in the family, and acknowledge that, because we have all kinds of different feelings and emotions, and they are like, even like anger, like you said earlier, it's not a wrong feeling. There's nothing wrong with it. It's telling us something. It's giving us some feedback that we need to explore and be curious about. Yeah, so it's wonderful. Thank you so much for reiterating that. We, as parents, we need to really watch our children and observe and notice what's going on and affirm it to them, acknowledge it to them, make them realize that we are in tune with them.
Yes, and that we see them. Ultimately, they want to know that they're seen.
Yes, and heard. Hey, that's what we all need and want.
Yes, yes, definitely. And something that's just sort of randomly popped into my mind now, because I know we also still were looking at boundaries and things like that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of boundaries and consequences.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I'm also, it came into my mind because I was talking about why I took my daughter's iPad away. I think as parents, one of the most important things that you should be doing is being aware that the consequence that you are giving for behaviors matches that behavior. For example, if your teen has, for some obscure reason, sworn at you or called you a name or something like that, sending them to their room and grounding them or taking away their technology is not actually addressing the behavior. In fact, the consequence is no longer related to the behavior at all. So we need to think, we need to say, okay, well, the consequence needs to be related to how they were talking or how they were approaching me as a person. So the appropriate consequence there would be a letter of apology using the correct words. A teen that is spending too much time on technology and therefore not engaging with the family or engaging with their friends or doing some movement, yes, the iPad or the phone does need to be taken away, but the appropriate consequence would be, okay, we're going for a walk in Newlands Forest. We're going down to the beach. Yes. Because you're trying to show that this behavior is not the behavior I'm looking for. So as a parent with boundaries particularly, make sure the consequences that you are giving are linked, because that is how your child is going to learn effectively. If you are just sending them to their bedroom and grounding them time and time and time again, all I'm learning is, okay, I just get sent to my room.
Yeah.
I don't understand at the end of the day how I'm supposed to fix what it is that I have done incorrectly. Or, for example, if they are not doing their chores, parents love to throw more chores on. But that's not fixing the behavior. The behavior was they didn't do the chore initially. They didn't participate as a family in that chore. So the correct consequence would be, well, now you're going to be doing your chores with one of the parents. Because now you're integrating the whole idea. The reason we do chores is because we are family. So now you're kind of putting family time and you're doing the chores. And yes, sometimes it's a bit more tiring for us as parents because we actually need them to be doing the chores to give us a little bit more time to be a family. But use that chore time to build a connection with your child. Go and do the dishes with them. And while they're washing up and you're drying up, talk about their day. And the consequence then is, okay, this is why I'm actually doing chores. I'm doing chores so my family can have a better life together. We can have harmony as a family. Mom is less stressed. Dad is less stressed. I am less stressed. So it's so important. Boundaries and the consequences to breaking those boundaries need to match. It is essential. So really, I'm very hesitant with grounding. I really am, because I don't see the benefit of grounding unless it's linked to the behavior. So the behavior is like, say, for example, you didn't listen and you were supposed to be home at 10. Then being grounded to going out to a party is actually a correct response, because you didn't show responsibility the first time. You weren't back when you were required to be home. But grounding for all different behaviors, it doesn't add to the consequence. For example, my older siblings are not going to like this, but this is one of the things I recommend. If they have not done their homework, one of the best ways to organize this is that they have to help their younger sibling ensure that the homework's done. Because they suddenly, oh, wow, I've got to take this response. They see it from a different perspective.
Yes.
And shame, I do feel sorry for our older siblings because there are a lot more options with consequences than the younger ones. But it does show a different dynamic. And it also teaches them, rather than giving them more homework, which idealistically doesn't work because there's a reason they didn't do the other homework in the first place. So it doesn't make sense to add on more. The same with the chores. It doesn't make sense to add on more chores because they didn't do the original chores. We've got to figure out what stopped that behavior from occurring. Why didn't my child do the homework?
Yeah.
And this is a big deal. A lot of parents get very angry about homework and not being done. And I think we as parents need to take a seat back and go, why is this homework not being done? What is the real reason? Was my child hungry? Was my child exhausted from the day? Maybe there's a learning challenge going on here. Like, to be honest, the number one sign that there's something not quite right in terms of your child's learning is when they start rebelling against the homework. And instead of now putting more homework on, which is actually more stressful and just going to cause more rebellion, you need to take those steps back. Is there too much work? Is there other reasons? Why is this work not being done in the classroom? Like, a lot of teachers only send homework done home if it's not being done in the classroom. So then we need to go to the teacher and we need to say, listen, I noticed my child's getting a lot of homework. Is there a reason that this is occurring? Maybe your child should not be sitting next to their best friend and then talking through the whole lesson. But this is why I say, for the boundaries and the consequences, we really need to make sure that the consequence we are implementing is linked to the boundary that has been broken.
And if it is linked, we are offering them a solution that is relevant also, that makes sense to the situation.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I agree with you. Melissa, this was amazing. Sorry, please go ahead.
I actually had a very interesting conversation with one of my parents the other day, and they had a teenage girl and she was repeatedly not coming home on time. So they actually asked her, the local police station, if she could come and just stay one Friday evening to see what happens after these late hours. So she didn't do anything else other than just sit and see what was actually going on. And I thought to myself, what an appropriate consequence, because suddenly she realized why her parents were so stressed about her not being home on time, about her not notifying them that why she was late. And it was quite hectic for her. Obviously, they made sure with the policeman that she didn't have to witness anything extreme, but enough for her to realize that there's a lot of things that happen at nighttime.
Wow.
And this is what we're concerned about. And I actually thought to myself, gee, that was such I wouldn't have thought of that, but it was a good consequence because, first of all, it gave her an awareness of why her parents were genuinely worried about her coming home late repeatedly. And sneaking out was the other one she was doing. And I think for her, it just, Sinta, it was like a realization of, okay. And it was one Friday night and she had to go do it. And it was all organized. I mean, I think the police station that was involved was fantastic. And it wasn't about trying to frighten her or scare her. It was just purely about, this is why we worry.
I think it's a brilliant idea. Because it's the old thing about being concerned for somebody's safety as opposed to wanting to be controlling or something like that. And they don't realize it. Very good idea.
It was a very good idea because all she did is she sat in the waiting room and just witnessed what happened that evening. She didn't go into any of the cases or witness anything hectic or go on a van or anything like that. But just to see why nighttime is a bit more daunting. And she was 18, but it still, I think, was a very important life lesson. And this is the whole thing. Your boundaries need to match the consequence. So for her to see, this wasn't about her mom and her dad trying to control her life or tell her not to live a life, but more just about being concerned. She's a matric student, so she's still a matric. But the awareness that it created, and it was very interesting because she came and spoke to me afterwards, and she was like, I just didn't understand.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand. And now I really understand that there is so much more in this world that I am not aware of. And I was like, yes, this is what we are trying to help you see, and why everybody is monumentally concerned when you're not home when you're supposed to be home, and you're not coming back, and you're sneaking out, and we don't know where you are.
Yeah.
And that actually is where I taught her. One of the things I teach all of my teenage parents and the teenagers who come here, there's a 3-step process that I recommend all parents follow 100%.
Mm-hmm.
First thing is, your teenager should have a trusted adult on speed dial on their phone, so that if they're in an emergency, they don't have to look for the number, they don't have to memorize the number, they just need to get that speed dial and get that person in. And it doesn't necessarily need to be you as the parent, but it has to be a trusted adult who can drive to them immediately. The second one is, all teenagers should have the police number and an ambulance number on their phone for easy access in case of massive emergencies. And the third one is actually something I've even implemented with my own daughter from a safety aspect, is we have a code. So she will send me either an emoji or a certain phrase or word. This tells me immediately that she's in a situation that she does not feel safe, that she feels uncomfortable in. I will then proceed to phone and give a reason as to why I need to come and collect her. And the best part about this is, Sinta, there's no bullying, because the other children don't realize that because they can check your phone and it has like a flower or something. Now they can't now say, oh, you called your parents to get us all into trouble. There's no evidence, literally no evidence. But you as a parent can now phone, get your child out of the situation. You can make up whatever reason you need to make up, whether you need to say there's a family emergency or whether something's cropped up, but you can get them out safely, and they will not be called a snitch or bullied or be in a situation that they no longer wish to be in. And this is something you can use if your child is at a sleepover. If parents do allow sleepovers, they can message you and you can just phone the other parents and say, sorry, my child has to come home. We've had X, Y, and Z. And it's such a nice safety network because your child remains safe. So if somebody else snatches their phone, there's no way of them interpreting that code as them telling you there's a problem.
I love that.
3 steps that I recommend every parent has in place with their kid.
Yeah. I love that. It's brilliant. And it also helps the children, especially the teenagers, with so much peer pressure to keep face in the situation, which is very, very important.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea. I love it. Yeah. Melissa, so much to learn and so little time. Thank you so much. This has been most insightful, and I think we can carry on for another hour, but we have to call this one a day.
Yes.
Thank you so much for imparting so much of your knowledge and experience and wisdom. And it's so great to hear from somebody who is a parent, but also specializes in learning and wellness and, you know, all the strategies that we mentioned.
Thank you so much for having me, Sinta. As always, I thoroughly enjoy our conversations, and thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks a lot.